So we've been talking about this morning, we've been hearing about from every speaker, the age of the internet, the age of iStreet, internet of everything, consumers drawing a map to their door. Consumers are the channel, we heard. It's important that we have data mastery as, you know, the new absolutely critical skill. So we're talking about big data all morning. We're talking about the opportunities. The advertising industry and marketing world is all about digital marketing, counting, aiming communications. Adrienne, are we on a collision course with regulators?
We have to distinguish between, between offline and online, because I think that with the regulations on offline marketing, it's pretty settled. I'm not saying it's being complied with, but nobody's really against it. I mean, there's no conflict on that. It's quite accepted. Whereas if you look at online regulations, it's completely different. It's really, I mean, it's about behavioral advertising, it's about tracking. So I think the regulators were a bit worried that they would not keep pace, with technology. So there was an inflation really of regulation on online. And there are various interpretations, and some are business friendly and some are not.
Nick, obviously the regulators are out there. They've been active writing regulations since before the internet on these privacy issues. Tell us about what IAA is, and tell us what industry is doing and what the threat is, and are we on a collision course? What do you think?
Am I on? The first thing to say is are there any regulators here? I think it's important, because I think we are on a collision course. But the reason I asked that question is that I would have liked regulators to have been here to hear the previous speakers and panels, because what I picked up is there's a lot of opportunity, there's a lot of innovation, and regulators are looking at the here and now and the problem now, or the issue now, if you like. They're not thinking about tomorrow. They're not thinking about the opportunities and the innovation. So what we've done from a behavioral advertising point of view, or targeted advertising point of view, is put in a system that gives users greater control, gives them transparency. It mirrors a similar kind of program in the United States, Canada, and soon Australia. So this is something that's pan-European. It's right across all 27, 28 European Union member states. And the point is we're trying to balance the protection of privacy with the fact that if you want more targeted advertising, you're going to need a little bit of information. And we've got to be able to do that in a way that helps data make the advertising more relevant, but at the same time give users control and empower them to have control over their privacy.
Chris, this issue about privacy and the control of data and the role of regulation, whose responsibility? Is it governments? Is it consumers? What do you think from a branding marketing perspective?
Yeah, that's a very good question. First, at what we do, we deal primarily with all the channels and customer experiences that use personal data. So a lot of the data available online is anonymized or pseudonymized data. The channels we represent, from social media to email marketing to marketing mail, traditional cold calling, really touch on the whole customer experience and rely 100% on personal data. And the interesting thing I took out of this morning is that the iStreet, the examples that Eric gave of the brand experiences, Burberry and Nike, they all drive from the consumer being willing to share their personal data with brands. And what we know is 75% of consumers will do that if they trust the brand they're doing business with. So the answer I'd give to Carla is that the owner of the relationship is the brand. Brands have to put building trust at the center of their brand proposition. It ties into some of the conversation we had before. And if you are a brand that is trusted, you can offer a Burberry type of experience. But if the customer doesn't believe that you will treat that data in the way that you promised, or if you don't have the right level of security, or if you're going to sell it on to somebody that they don't want to receive it, then they will not let you put a chip in their handbag. They will not let you wear their wristband, and so on. So I would say the brand marketers need to be the owner of the relationship, and if you get it right and if you put it central to your brand proposition, there actually won't be any problem with regulators.
And Dominic, I saw your head nodding and Adrian's head nodding, and I want to come to you and your reaction, because you started nodding immediately when you talked about trust.
We had an email exchange before the meeting.
We almost had our panel on email before we got it.
And I absolutely come from the same place as Chris. I mean, I think this idea of how you use the data responsibly is going to be absolutely the thing that takes us forward. And I mean, you say that we're on a collision course with regulators. Well, I think it's yes, no. Depending, regulators aren't saying don't aim, don't count. They're saying do it in a way which is transparent. And I think it's not responding to that request for transparency and letting consumers know what's happening to them and do something about it, which is going to cause the regulation to be stricter than it need otherwise be. And the other problem we have at the moment is I think the Commission is trying to get the local governments, national governments, is trying to push them into making decisions about the whole issue of consent and things faster than perhaps is enabling us to convince them otherwise. And if we need more time, we need more talk. And if you think about, for example, Jan Philipp Albrecht, who's the German Green MEP who's been sort of playing around with all this consent stuff. I mean, 18 months ago, profiling was a dirty word, and now profiling is not prohibited anymore. So it is possible to change the way that people think, but it takes time and it takes talk.
And before I want to just kind of influence your direction here, because you came from the regulatory standpoint. You were a policy person. You were in the Commission, and this is a group of marketers. So boiling it down, what should we be doing? Talking about the trust and talking about what the Commission is thinking about.
Well, you see, to answer what you were saying. I think the problem is that the regulations are not, they're not interpreted in the same way. I mean, when I was saying that some are business friendly and some are not, I mean, we all know, talking about cookies, for instance, we've seen that the ICO regulator interprets the notion of consent. I mean, it can be implicit consent. Well, if you look at what is done in France, I mean, it's completely the other side. I mean, you have to ask, do you agree? Do you accept cookies? Yes, no, for which purpose, etc. So it's very different. I mean, we have very varied interpretations, and that's the problem with the regulators.
Oliver, you have been, self-regulation has been a moving target, and you've had to evolve.
Yes.
So talk about that, the evolution of self-regulation, and is that the solution? Can we solve this through technology?
I think we can solve part of it through technology. The approach that Nick was talking about through the EDAA is one in which we build on the credible self-regulatory systems that we have here in the UK, the Advertising Standards Authority, with the technology solutions of allowing consumers to take their control and choice and make it in a transparent way. But it's only part of the way, because I think at the moment the technology is rather clunky. It's not done in a very easy way. So I think we have to be much more, we have to show respect in what we do. We have to be much more relevant. And so the technology, I think, has to drive things that it's not just the geeks who are able to opt out, or if you want to opt in again, you want to opt into relevant bits of advertising. Some of it's not got there yet. There are experiments out there, but the technology needs to be able to allow that to happen. So self-regulation, I think, can get to a solution, but it's only part of that solution.
How many countries have self-regulation just in the advertising category right now?
If you're talking across Europe, near enough all the European Union countries, and then we have another 20-odd countries across the world.
And how many, just a quick show of hands, how many in this room have heard of EDAA or DAA in the United States before? If there's anything that we want you to walk away with is some knowledge of the EDAA approach. So, Nick, do you think you can boil it down to 2 sentences of what EDAA is and what it does and why it works?
An icon in ads or on web pages.
Which
That's
does?
which if you click on it, it gives more information about the data that's collected and used, and at a different granular levels provides the user with the opportunity to kind of manage their preferences or opt out.
And critically important, this icon is something that advertisers subscribe to. So you need to look for this icon, and we as marketers should understand and talk about the icon. You wanted to add something.
I just wanted to, I mean, there's a danger that we all agree here, so I'm going to disagree with Dominic, actually, because I think there's a danger with the regulation that's going through Brussels, and I appreciate it's 118 pages of complex regulation that I'm sure you've all read.
That's short for Americans. Only 180.
It's very, very complex, and the point I'm making is that I don't think they've got the balance right. There's a danger here, because of course they're talking about explicit consent. And I think there's some general consensus, actually, within the institutions in Brussels that explicit consent will be the way forward. So if you have to process personal data, even pseudonymous personal data, if the legal basis to process that is through explicit consent, think what that means for marketing. It means that users actually have to go through, from a direct marketing point of view, that might be okay, but it means users have to go through a number of loopholes, and we are going to end up with a more logged-in environment, internet environment, which, you know, we might think is an opportunity, but I think for a lot of our business models, it's a problem.
Is that really a disagreement with you, Dominic?
Not really. I didn't say that.
Apologies. No, I wanted to create some...
Let's disagree for heaven's sake. Let's have a row. I was thinking more about the fact that the outcome of this is not yet defined. And therefore there is an opportunity still to mitigate some of the things.
No, although I think, sorry.
I just want to add one thing, maybe just change tack a little bit. But I think in part this business practice is trying to put a round lid on a square box, because the extent to which people want privacy is something that I question seriously. I mean, there was a recent a couple of years ago, Ofcom study that showed that something like 80% of parents don't care about what their children are doing online and don't monitor it. So, I mean, there is an element here of people having to take responsibility at some point, other than just having laws passed.
Chris, before you jump in, is the issue, and to the panel that I'm going to, what you just said, is the issue really privacy, or is it the use of personal data? Is it the privacy? Do I want to maintain privacy, or do I care what you do with the information I give you?
I think that's a really good question, and we've done a consumer attitudes to privacy and data protection. And more than 3/4 of people will share data with companies they trust, but they're not all the same. There's really 3 broad segmentations. So one mistake is to treat everybody as if they have the same attitudes to privacy. 53% of people are what we call data pragmatists. They're people who are willing to exchange data when there's a good reason to do so. About 16% are unconcerned. They'll just be like those people Dominic mentioned, they'll share with anybody. And then there's 31% who are more data fundamentalists, skew a little bit older, and they're a little bit more concerned, but they will share when it is to do a transaction, and they will share to well-established brands. And I think the point is that Nick was making, that the legislation going through Europe now is very, very prescriptive as a one-size-fits-all, whereas the original Data Protection Act was based on principles. And when you're based on principles, you have the scope to adapt to changing worlds and changing technology. So I would say if they will share it and be happy to when it's for the right reason and if they know what the company is going to do with it. But what they don't like is something that my industry sector has been very bad at. They don't like is the non-transparent data chain. So if you give data to one company and they sell it to someone else and sell it to someone else, and by the time you get it, you have the 6th person down the data chain who has no idea what the original source is, and then you have no idea how your data got there. That's what the consumer really doesn't like.
Adrian and everyone, we talk about regulation. This audience doesn't think a lot about regulation. We're thinking about opportunity. We're on this, inconsistent course. We've got regulators in Washington and Brussels who want to live in a world of approval in advance, the right to be forgotten, do not track. How do we solve this? Because this world is continuing. You heard that this morning.
Well, that's one of the most difficult questions, of course, because we have several jurisdictions, and as long as we have several jurisdictions, we will have conflicts of laws. I mean, this is for sure. Europe is trying to make one law. you were right to say that it's going to be much more dogmatic than what it is now, because it doesn't give way to flexibility. But at the same time, I think that even with one law, we will have several interpretations. So, we're going ahead of difficulties for sure. I think we need. For marketing, we need trust, and we need also. we need both. We need to build trust, and we need also to act in compliance with laws. Otherwise. And the problem is that the regulators are going very dogmatic now. We were talking about DAA. I think it's a great initiative. Really, it's simple, it's clear. The regulators have disagreed. With DAA, and I think it shows that. I think it doesn't show a very good tendency.
I want to ask everyone, just what do you think is next? We have a lot of opportunities, a lot of challenges. Nick, what's next?
Well, I just want to pick up on one point you say. I think there's a danger that we're not against regulation. This regulation brings more data sets into the scope of regulation. Not a problem. The world moves on. The digital world is here to stay. But the regulation should incentivize for businesses to do the right thing, which is innovate in privacy. And that's one of the problems that it's not doing. It's not getting that balance right, and therefore it's not encouraging data minimization, for example.
Oliver, you wanted to say something.
I think with great opportunity comes great responsibility. So I think, first of all, the industry must look at how it can make that responsibility, the respect of the consumer, make it in a simple way, so that when they go to look at legislation, they say, well, actually, there are these alternatives and they work. So I think that's one thing that needs to be done. And currently in the European Commission, there's an initiative on corporate social responsibility to look at basically leveraging effective self-regulation, so effective responsibility of the industry. So my appeal is to, what's coming next? Well, there'll be a whole bunch of things, somebody behind this wall developing something around the corner. But please test it in terms of responsibility and show that you can respect the consumer.
Chris, last words on responsibility, then I'll go to Dominic. What's next?
Well, I think we've covered it quite well. I think the danger is that the regulators don't trust people, and we do live in a world where the consumer has power. We heard a little bit about that earlier. And if companies transgress and step over the line, they can react very, very quickly, and that company's reputation is damaged quite considerably. At the same time, there are always companies, cowboy companies, who want to defraud consumers, are interested in short-term gain, and will break the regulation. So I agree with Nick, there has to be a certain level of regulation so that we know what's right behavior and not. But then marketers need to not do things, and it's another expression from this morning, that they need to stop doing things just because they can, and worry about what they should do and what's right. And so I'd ask marketers to focus a bit more on better behavior
And Dominic represents all the marketers in creativity in Europe. So here we go, Dominic. You get the last speaker.
Well, I think everybody's covered off the things that are around the corner. I think education is critical. Consumers and industry about responsibility, and consumers about what makes informed choices and how they should exercise that. I think just on a creativity side, I think there's a danger of thinking that big data is a kind of solution to marketers' problems in the future. But I think it's really important to understand that big data doesn't equal big ideas. That there's still a place for creativity, and I think the agencies are going to need to face up to the fact that people who can understand and analyze big data and turn that into creative ideas are not necessarily a mix of planners and creatives. It might be a new kind of person who has particular skills in that area, and I think that's a challenge that we have to face.
And we all have to be that new kind of person, and being that new kind of person, it's not only listening to all the opportunities and thinking creatively about the opportunity, but look into this EDAA icon issue, self-regulation, talk about it, be an advocate for it, and talk amongst yourselves. It's very important. So I thank all the panelists today. Thank you for your information and your expertise, and thank you for your attention.